some things will never change. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, or if you are new here, then please do me a favour and hit that subscribe button. So, the Cleveland Browns lose their Week 1 opening game of the 2025 season against the Cincinnati Bengals in the most Cleveland Browns way possible. Really shot themselves in the foot in this one. Is there a more Cleveland Browns loss than this? Not really. About as Cleveland Browns as it gets, but we're going to talk about the game, of course, highlight some of the good, but obviously the bad as well. But of course, this is a really, really tough way to lose Week 1. A lot of Browns fans went into this game pretty confident that the Browns could win this game. We've seen how the Browns play the Bengals under Kevin Stefanski with the winning record. How they played the Bengals Week 1 in a couple of seasons ago, hoping to come out similar, in this game and kind of dominate on defense and do enough on offense. And, they followed that script pretty much to a T. The defense was a little bit shaky to start with, but after that they were really, really good, as advertised. And the offense, whilst were, a little bit stale in some areas, and at some times the offense was actually quite good in this game, and Joe Flacco was able to move the ball. They were able to convert on third downs. They pretty much did everything they needed to do to win this game. But as I said, unfortunately, you've got to be good through all three phases in the NFL if you want to win games, and the Cleveland Browns were unable to do that, with special teams letting them down once again. We went through the whole Dustin Hopkins stuff last year. We were all happy that the Browns decided to move on from Hopkins, so you can't shout too much at the Browns for this, because at least they tried to address the kicker situation. Most other of these other UFL kickers that have come in have been pretty good. Brandon Aubrey's the best kicker in the NFL, so it's not like they were pulling him out of nowhere. But unfortunately, that's what we're all going to remember from this game. That's going to be the biggest takeaway from this game, is Andre Schmidt missing that. Well, both the kicks. The extra point, if he didn't miss that, we're talking about a 17-17 game. That's a completely different game. And then, of course, missing the go-ahead field goal at the end, which, you should be making as an NFL kicker. It wasn't 50-plus yards, so you should be making that as an NFL kicker. We'll start on Schmidt, obviously. I don't think you can trot him out there again. I think the Browns need to find a new kicker again. Browns going to be in the market for a kicker, because I don't really know how you can go trot Schmidt out there next week, knowing that he's just cost you this game, missed those kicks. No one's going to feel confident when he steps up. It was kind of like the end of the game. Even if the Browns got a chance, which they did, to go, get the ball back, you still had no confidence that Schmidt would be able to make a field goal if they were able to get into field goal range. So, that's obviously where, as I said, the biggest takeaway from this game was the mistakes. There were other mistakes throughout this game. As I mentioned, the defense was a little bit shaky early on. They gave up a couple of 3rd and 9s in this game, which should be their bread and butter. But other than that, the defense was solid. And then obviously some of the drops on offense as well. Some of the penalties that, there weren't too many. DeJuan Jones had a few on the offensive line. They had one, I think, illegal formation penalty. But, a few penalties, but not too much to be too mad at. But then obviously the drops as well. On that, was it 3rd to last drive, when obviously the Judy drop, followed by the Fanning drop on 4th down. If they're able to catch the ball there, the Browns are able to go and score there, and they take the lead. Then obviously they're in a much different position when they're driving at the end of the game, when they did. So sloppy mistakes. That's the reason why the Browns lost this game. Obviously the biggest of those mistakes being the missed field goal and the missed extra point. So just found a way to shoot themselves in the foot, staying on the negative. The run game, it really is crying out for Quinshon Judkins to come into this run game, because it's very hard for the Browns to pick up yards on 1st and 2nd down. We didn't get too much push up the middle. Joe Bitonio wasn't exactly great in this game. And you know, Dylan Sampson, as good as he was, which we'll get onto, he's not a big enough runner. Jerome Ford's not good enough or big enough to be able to make up for those deficiencies and that lack of push up front. So, you know, the Browns were just unable to run the ball for pretty much the most of this game. Their run game was pretty much the screen game, which, as I mentioned, Dylan Sampson had a really, really good game in this one. But, you know, you look at the stats. This screams a Cleveland Browns win. You know, you look at the head-to-head stats in this game, it's kind of hard to figure out how the Browns actually lost this. But then you go down to the bottom, and there it is: turnovers 2-0. When the Cleveland Browns lose the turnover battle under Kevin Stefanski, they lose the game. That's just kind of been how it's been. Every time they lose that turnover battle, more often than not, they lose. When they win the turnover battle, they win. Just doesn't matter about all the other stats. Doesn't matter how, 327 total yards to the Cincinnati's 141. 71 plays to Cincinnati's 49. 278 passing yards to Cincinnati's 95. 4.6 yards per play to Cincinnati's 2.9. Doubled their amount of yards, tripled their amount of passing yards, doubled their yards per attempt. Obviously, the rushing yards were about the same because, as I said, the Browns weren't able to run the ball well in this game. But all of that doesn't matter when you turn the ball over twice. You don't get any turnovers on the other side, and you're missing your kicks on special teams. That's just a recipe to lose football games in the NFL. We've seen it far too many times with the Browns in recent years, and they've just found a way once again to do it again. The 2 interceptions from Flacco, they're obviously going to show up on the box score, and obviously everyone's going to point to Joe Flacco throwing interceptions again, but neither interceptions were on Flacco. You can't put either of them. The first one, obviously, with the bobble up from Judy, and then the second one on that final drive, bobbling out of Ced Tillman's chest up for the interception. So, you can't put either interception on Joe Flacco in this game. Joe Flacco was actually pretty solid in this game. He did everything that you need him to do for the Browns to move the ball, for the Browns to go and win games this year. But as I said, they just shot themselves in the foot in special teams and with the turnovers. But Joe Flacco, 31 for 45, 290 yards, 1 touchdown, obviously those 2 interceptions. We don't want Joe Flacco throwing the ball 45 times a game, especially not a game where the Browns are, it's not like the Browns were down big at any point in this game. So that just highlights, obviously, how they were unable to get the run game going. And, 24 carries for 49 yards is not great at all. The longest run play of the day was 5 yards, so they weren't able to get any explosive plays out of that run game. Obviously, better out of the receivers in the passing game. Jerry Jeudy had a couple of mistakes in this game, but five receptions for 66 yards, and 2 of those, including the 25-yarder, were on third down on that final drive, second to final drive, to put the Browns into field goal range, basically put them into field goal position and give them a chance to win the game. So, other than the drop and obviously the bubble for the interception, Jeudy was pretty decent in this game. Dylan Sampson with 8 receptions, 64 yards, multiple first downs that he was able to pick up. Dylan Sampson was the X factor in this game. Him and Harold Fanning Jr. Those 2 guys were great. They were featured a lot. Harold Fanning Jr. 7 catches for 63 yards. Ced Tillman as well, 5 catches, 52 yards and a touchdown, and then Njoku 3 catches and 37 yards. So, we got good play out of the receivers, minus obviously the couple of drops that we saw. And as I mentioned, Dylan Sampson and Harold Fanning, really exciting out of those 2 rookies. In their first ever NFL game, to look as good as they did, to make as impactful plays as they did. Harold Fanning picking up multiple third downs in this game as well. That's the encouraging stuff from the offense. Yes, they only scored 16 points. You're going to have to score more than that in the NFL and this year to win games. But what I saw from Dylan Sampson, even Raheem Sanders, in those short yardage situation was able to pick him up. Harold Fanning as well, even Ced Tillman, was encouraging stuff. Yes, there were some drops in there. Said Tillman, obviously unfortunate at the end, but it's hard to come away from this game and not be excited about those young guys, because they did really impress in this game, on the offensive side of the ball. And then moving to the defense, the defense, as I mentioned, they were a little bit shaky early on in this game. Gave up obviously the opening touchdown to the Bengals, but other than that, they were pretty solid. Joe Burrow finished this game with, I think, 113 yards, 1 touchdown. I think the Bengals had a net 7 passing yards in the second half. So, the Browns were really able to put it on early on. The Cincinnati's run game, which was pretty much just Chase Brown, and early on was actually cooking the Browns pretty early on. But then, as I mentioned, kind of with the rest of the defense, they were able to kind of shore that up a little bit. He ended up finishing with only 21 carries for 43 yards. Carson Schwarzenegger had the most tackles in this game, as expected. We're probably going to see that most of the season. 1 tackle for loss for him, which I'm pretty sure was on that absolute thumping tackle he had on 3rd down to force the field goal, which was obviously crucial in that area. Devin Bush was there, pretty much there and abouts all game. He had a good game. Isaiah McGuire, I think early on in this game, the opening drive for the defense, they ran Chase Brown at Alex Wright a lot, and they were having quite a lot of success in it, and that's kind of why I would have. That's why I kind of argued, in some of the other videos that I did, that I'd probably rather Isaiah McGuire start ahead of Alex Wright, and Alex Wright more as that situational pass rusher, just because Isaiah McGuire is one of the best one of the best run-stopping defensive ends in the NFL. He's a really, really good run stopper. So once he came in and kind of shored up that run defense, it was quite evident. And Alex Wright, only had 1 tackle in this game, didn't get. His snaps were limited after it was quite evident that they were, attacking him in the run game. But Isaiah McGuire was really good, as he continues to be. 2 tackles for loss, had that 1 sack on that just absolutely incredible sequence. That if the Browns had won this game, we're all going to be sat here talking about that sequence, because it generally was one of the best sequences I've seen from a Browns defense in my life. Myles Garrett getting back-to-back sacks. The Browns in that moment had to get the ball back on offense. They needed their defense to, get the ball back and get it quick. And not only did they force the 3 and out, it was 3 consecutive sacks, kept pushing them back, nearly got the safety at the end, which would have actually won the game for the Browns, annoyingly. So they were about a yard away from winning this game as well, not just in the field goal, but obviously with that one as well. As I mentioned, Myles Garrett with the back-to-back sacks, and then Isaiah McGuire to cap it off with that 3rd sack. That's one of the best sequences I've ever seen from the Browns defense, and that's what we expect a lot of this year. That's what they can do. That's what they started to show in this game. It's just so unfortunate that the Browns lost this game and shot themselves in the foot, because otherwise we're coming away from this game and we're talking about that sequence, and that's one of the better sequences that we will ever remember, because it obviously led to the Browns getting the ball back and going to win this game. Myles Garrett was just insane, as he always is. 5 total tackles, all solo, 2 sacks, 4 tackles for loss. He started his season as he means to go on. As I said, it's just a shame that the Browns lost this game, because there were so many good performances on this defense, even the offense as well, that we would have been talking about, and that would have got all of the talk all week, just not just from the Browns media, but national media as well. Everyone would be talking about how Myles Garrett basically went and clutched up, got those 2 sacks to get the ball back, and the Browns were able to win the game. But unfortunately, obviously, that wasn't the case. The corners actually held up quite well. Greg Newsome, shout out to him. He had a really good game. 2 really good reps on Jamar Chase on 3rd down. Played him really, really well. Miles Harden as well, I was a little bit worried. I've talked about it in the last week or so, who is going to be the Browns' nickel. Miles Harden came in that role, and I can't have any complaints. Obviously, I'll have to go back and rewatch the game, rewatch the film. But from my initial impressions after watching the game, Miles Harden didn't stand out in a bad way. So those corners and those safeties as well, The DBs definitely played well, and even some of those depth guys as well. Was a pleasant surprise to see those guys play well, and if those DBs can play that well all year behind that Browns defensive line, then they're going to be just fine on defense. But overall, it's just really annoying, as I said, because you've got some good performances here, especially on defense. You've got some good performances on the offensive side of the ball. As I said, there is encouraging stuff. As I readjust my hat, there is encouraging stuff to take away from this game. I'm sure a lot of people probably feel better about this offense than they did obviously before this game. But unfortunately, it's just along with a loss, not a win. But as I said, lots of good stuff to take from the young guys on offense, lots of good stuff to take from the young guys on defense. Pretty much all of Andrew Berry's draft picks looked good in this game. I mean, Harold Fanning was looking like one of the best offensive players that he's ever drafted, and it's only his first game. He's really an exciting player. They had him lined up as an inline tight end. They had him lined up out wide. I'm pretty sure they had him lined up at fullback, and they even had him lined up at quarterback in the Wildcat, which was a very questionable play call at the time. But even still, Harold Fanning, we talked about it all off season. He's going to be used a lot in this offense, and if this game is anything to go by, it just shows you how much he is going to be used. It was obviously great seeing Aiden Huntington in the jumbo package for the Raheem Sanders touchdown. So, yes, there's a lot of good stuff to take away from this game. Yes, we're obviously going to be disappointed. Yes, it's a loss. There's no sugarcoating it. The Browns pretty much lost this game themselves. And obviously, that's something that the Browns have done quite a lot in recent years. So that's, of course, not a good sign. But even with all of that being said, I do think there are plenty of positives that we can take away from this game going forwards. The Browns were competitive throughout this whole game. This is one of the the Bengals offense is going to be one of the best offenses in the NFL this year. They held them to 100 yards pretty much, 7 yards passing in the second half. This defense did their job. The Browns offense was able to move the ball. It looked nowhere near as stale and stagnant as it has the last few years. They were able to move the ball. They were able to pick up on third down. Yes, I want to see more explosive plays from the passing game. You can't just rely on that kind of methodical dink and dunk down the field. I mean, don't get me wrong, when it works, it's great. I mean, the Browns had a 9-minute drive. Their opening drive was 9 minutes long. Because of how long their drive was, the Bengals went 30 minutes between offensive snaps after their first drive and between their second drive. The Browns dominated the time of possession. That's the formula to win games this year. But obviously, as I said, I would like to see some more explosive plays. But as I said, you can take all of those positives. You can have a really good game from your defense. You can have a solid game from your offense, solid game from your rookies, all of that stuff. But none of that matters if you're going to turn the ball over and you're going to make mistakes when, at the most crucial moment. So that's why the Browns lost, shot themselves in the foot. We need a new kicker. I will be very annoyed if they try and trot Andre Schmidt out there again. I mean, credit to him, good luck to him, but I don't think anyone on the Browns roster, let alone any fan, is going to be confident about Andrew Schmidt kicking for this team again. So that's obviously a big concern. Need to figure out the kicker. Need to figure out, that role, because that's going to lose you games this year. As I said, the Browns are going to be competitive in games. They're going to keep games close, but you need to be able to make your kicks. So that's the biggest concern. The Browns still making mistakes, still shooting themselves in the foot, still finding ways to lose games. They need a new kicker. Week one, it's always it feels cursed at this point with the Browns. Everything that could have gone wrong seemed like it started to go wrong in this game, despite the good performances. But at least there were good performances to take away from it. We don't feel as bad as we did after last year's Week 1 performance. But obviously, this schedule is not getting any easier. The Browns' next 5 games, obviously kicking off with the Ravens next week, are tough. But if the Browns can play like they did today, they are going to be competitive in games. They just need to figure out how to stop shooting themselves in the foot. Figure out the kicker position, get someone in there that can actually make fucking kicks. And the Browns will win games this year. It's really annoying because, as we lost the Steelers were able to come back and win their game in the most bullshit Steelers way possible. And the Jaguars are currently up 23-3 on the Panthers. So not a great day for us, guys. We're down bad at the minute, as we normally are week 1 as Browns fans. But it's week 1. We might be 0-1, but there's still positives to take from this game. There's still 16 more games to play. So keep moving forwards. Put this one behind us. It's going to be a long week just talking about that fucking missed field goal. Talking about that literally 1 yard from getting a safety, which obviously would have been enough to win this game. Football really is a game of inches. But that would do it for me today, guys. I don't want to rant too much on. I'll obviously break this game down better throughout the week. Once, obviously, I've actually gone back and watched it and all of that stuff. But if you do enjoy my content, guys, please do me a favour and drop this video a like and a subscribe. Nearly forgot what to say then. You can check the links in the description to see where you can follow and interact with me on social media. As I always say, I'm trying to build a community of Cleveland Browns fans, and even if that means I only get to talk to one fan a day, I'm happy because I'm talking Browns football with the best fan base in the world. Thanks again for watching, guys. Have an amazing rest of the week, as much as you can on a loser's Monday. Don't let this one, annoy you too much. But most importantly, go Browns.